slow to recognize our own hearing loss.
Is hearing loss on the rise, Dr. Myers?
It has been on the rise with the increase in toxic noise and with the aging of the population. And so we have things in our ears that expose us to more sound. And as more and more of us get older, because of the association of hearing loss and age, more and more people are going to be needing to visiting the hearing professionals who are here with us today.
And Stephanie, we know too, when we're in large crowds, it's so difficult, Dr. Myers pointed out, it's difficult to hear. You might not even realize that you suffer from some hearing loss because there's all this background noise. What's Hearing Loops doing to support people with hearing loss in that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question, Marissa. Thank you. So induction loops are really important for people that wear hearing assistive technology that do have something called a telecoil or T-coil present in the device. And what we're doing as part of our organization is we're getting the message out that induction loop technology is available in Canada and is really very helpful for people that do have either a cochlear implant or a hearing aid that has the telecoil present, because what it does is help to ground the noise that they're intended to hear, whether it's instructions from someone at a bank teller, in a public space, or even within their own workplace. If you're sitting around a boardroom table, hopefully we'll be returning to that at some point in the near future. Someone that may be hard of hearing can benefit by their employer installing loop technology to help them, again, hear what they're supposed to be hearing rather than background noise, which is very common.
I benefit from the hearing loops that she was describing. I have one in my home, so my TV broadcasts through my hearing aids, which are customized wireless in-the-ear TV speakers. My office, where I'm speaking to you, the phone broadcasts through both my hearing aids. Where I worship, my campus auditoriums. And more here in the United States, as well as in Canada, we're seeing this hearing loop technology spread. It's coming to all New York City airports, all the gate areas. Is coming to more and more worship places and auditoriums. And it's fantastic. Let me tell you, it is a godsend. And it alleviates the frustration of being left out as someone with the invisible disability of hearing loss.
All right, thank you for that. We need to take a short break. There's more when we return.
But when we think of hearing loss, it's a communication disorder, and we as humans connect with people via communication.
Welcome back. Hearing loss has an effect on more than just your ability to hear. Hearing plays a major role in our emotional well-being, mental health, and overall quality of life. Yet, millions of people ignore the signs, despite research showing alarming consequences if left untreated. So, Dr. Myers, why don't I start with you on this one? As somebody who lives with hearing loss, what would you say are some of the psychological characteristics of hearing impairment?
Well, certainly when we don't hear somebody, there's great frustration. There's a barrier in social relationships. There's a higher risk of depression. And if prolonged, there's even a higher risk of dementia.
Dr. Holland, Dr. Myers just mentioned their depression as one of the characteristics, psychological characteristics. And I think that it makes intuitive sense that there would be a connection between hearing loss and depression. There's also a very big difference between someone who uses a hearing aid to help them with minor hearing loss and someone who has lost their hearing completely. What is the difference in those characteristics between those two people?
Yeah, I think isolation is a big one. I think when you're, depending on when you lost your hearing, the way that you learn to adapt to that situation, whether it's later in life or earlier in life, I think it makes a really big difference, and what kind of support network you have as well. Whether you have others in your life who have hearing loss as well. And there are networks and communities that are able to kind of have different ways of communicating.
Jillian, do you think it's easy to attribute those signs, depression, isolation, to something else and not hearing loss?
I think that they are unfortunate consequences of hearing loss. Yes, absolutely. You can experience those things outside of hearing loss. But when we think of hearing loss, It's a communication disorder, and we as humans connect with people via communication. So you can understand easily how it would actually affect you so deeply and in all aspects of life. And I think we should also mention that it's not just the person with hearing loss that is affected, that those around them are also affected, loved ones, that it has an impact on relationships. Because again, we communicate with the ones around us, and this is how we express ourselves and how we connect. So it affects a lot of people. It can also affect your family members as well, and they can be experiencing the same sorts of symptoms or negative side effects.
Can I just ask, Jillian, can hearing worsen if left untreated?
Yes. Hearing loss is typically progressive anyways. So as we age, it does tend to worsen over time. But there is research to indicate that the longer you go with untreated hearing loss, the harder it is to get that back, or for the brain to sort of respond to those sounds once we stimulate the brain again. So you're never doing yourself any good by waiting.
Gordana, there's no question we place a high value on our hearing, and yet so few people who know they have hearing loss, it was mentioned earlier, I think only 20% actually do something about it. Why do you think that is?
Well, again, it's difficult to answer for each individual. It's their own reason why they go get their hearing tested for.
Sure.
But I think overall, too, we talked about a lot of things here. A lot is about communication barriers and accessibility too. Once you get your hearing aid, once you get fitted, etc., and it's going outside the home, and what barriers you face, and that seems to be a big issue too. As far as in the States, I think they're far advanced in some areas, but in Canada, we're moving forward in so many areas. Having the induction loop systems beyond in retail stores, etc., that those communication barriers are removed, and we need to work harder towards that across Canada. That once you get the hearing aid doesn't mean it's all fixed and one hearing aid fix all. We all vary. We need to break down those communication barriers. That is key.
Can you prevent hearing loss? Peter, I'll ask you. Is it something that you can prevent?
Prevention is something that needs to happen long before people notice it. And that's because a lot of hearing loss is connected with workplace noise. Wearing proper hearing protection in a workplace that is too loud is clearly something that needs to get taken care of. Ideally, the workplaces need to become quieter, but it's typically something that people have the damage, at least the initial damage, long before they have the experience of it. And so young people may not be as careful in their workplace as they ought to be and suffer later.
So it could be something as simple as, even if we were talking, about prevention, you may not be aware that you're listening to your earbuds too loudly, or you may not be aware that perhaps if you're at a super loud concert, you could put those orange earbuds in your ears to help protect them. Many people don't do that. Maybe they don't even think about it.
Exactly.
And then what can be done further then to mitigate the damage that has already been done? Dr. Myers.
Well, I'm not sure this would mitigate the damage, but I was privileged to serve 4 years on the National Institute on Deafness Advisory Council, where I got to know a University of Iowa hearing geneticist. And I have a very peculiar pattern of hearing loss, and he invited me to send in a test tube of spit, and he analyzed the genes and could find a very specific gene that is causing my hearing loss. So I asked him, could you use the CRISPR gene editing technology to potentially prevent hearing loss long-term in a young person who carries this gene? And he said, absolutely, and that's the next phase of our research. And in fact, we're able to administer this technology in one ear, but not the other, which we can use as a control or comparison condition. So maybe in the distant future, we'll be able to prevent some of the hearing loss we now have with genetic engineering.
That's neat. All right. Well, don't go away. There's more on the other side of this break.
I had close-fitting hearing aids that made my own voice sound as if my head were in a bucket. Many of today's hearing aids are open-fitting and don't have that, and they're easier to adapt to.
Welcome back. Researcher and social psychologist Dr. David Myers is not only an internationally known author of textbooks and general interest books, he's also an advocate for hearing-friendly assistive technology. Dr. Myers, who has himself suffered hearing loss, joins me now to talk about his journey. So, Dr. Myers, first of all, can you describe your hearing loss for us? How severe is it?
My audiologist calls it severe. If I take out my hearing aids, I cannot hear my wife on the pillow next to me.
When did you first notice there was an issue?
I inherited the hearing loss from my mother that she got from her mother. And so I was first tested when I was a teenager. I was the case of the neurological case of the month as a graduate student at the University of Iowa. But I, for reasons we've discussed already on our program, didn't get hearing aids until my early 40s. And since then, the hearing loss has been progressive. It's almost complete in the left ear, but I'm still able to have conversation as we're having right now. But I may, before my life is over, be a cochlear implant candidate.
How did you feel when you were first diagnosed?
I think I just kind of understood it. I think I had trouble adapting to hearing aids initially. The audiologist with us here today will understand what I'm saying. I had close-fitting hearing aids that made my own voice sound as if my head were in a bucket. Many of today's hearing aids are open-fitting and don't have that, and they're easier to adapt to. Now, however, once I've adapted to the hearing aids, and it takes time, but I would encourage people to be patient to do it, I couldn't live without them. And I very soon realized how important they were to my well-being and how important hearing is to our functioning as social animals.
So would you say that your hearing loss affected you emotionally at all?
Yes, and it also affected my ability to teach and to be able to hear students' questions and respond without sweating bullets, because no matter how they repeated their question, I couldn't understand it. And that ultimately led to my backing off from teaching and becoming a full-time textbook writer and researcher.
Has COVID impacted your situation at all?
Certainly. As we've discussed earlier, it's led to a masked world. A very big part of hearing is lip reading. It's also reading facial expressions. And we're blocked off from that very important channel of information, so, as well as the acoustic muffling that a face mask entails. There are some clear masks that allow us to see others' mouths, but they muffle sound even more. And so we people with hearing loss are so looking forward to the pandemic ending.
So when did you become then an advocate for hearing loops?
I became an advocate for hearing loops after visiting the Iona Abbey off the west coast of Scotland in 1999. I couldn't hear a thing as sound reverberated around that enormous cathedral. And then my wife noticed there was a sign on the wall with a ear symbol and a little T at the bottom that indicated this was telecoil compatible assistive listening. Now the telecoil is what Stephanie mentioned earlier, a little magnetic receptor in the hearing aid, costs essentially nothing. You turn that on and suddenly the speakers are not up in the ceiling, they're right inside my ears. I was in tears, the sound was so deliciously clear. And I thought, my goodness, North Americans ought to have access to this technology too, which is spread all over Scandinavia and the United Kingdom. And so that led me back here to experiment with my community, where now virtually every worship place and auditorium has this, to create a website, hearingloop.org, and then to join with others in North America to advocate for the spread of this technology in the United States and in Canada. And it's so exciting to see it gaining momentum.
So much progress has been made on that front, probably
Yes.
a lot to do with your advocacy.
And that of many others. And simultaneously, Bluetooth has been a wonderful but very different and complementary technology that allows my smartphone to communicate through my two hearing aids. And believe me, people, if you have trouble listening to the phone, you would not believe how much better you can understand if you hear telephone conversation through two ears rather than one.
So where would you say then are the opportunities to do better?
The opportunities to do better are, first of all, for any auditorium or worship place that delivers, it has a public address system. It should take account not only in its accessibility policies, not only of people in wheelchairs with mobility impairments, but also the great vast number of Canadians who have the invisible disability of hearing loss, and to provide the simplest, most optimum hearing technology, which is a hearing loop, which means I don't have to check out special equipment. It doesn't deliver generic sound. I can just press a button and my hearing aid delivers sound customized for my ears from the speakers right inside my ears. It's wonderful.
All right, well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Up next, we'll show you the most advanced hearing technologies on the market. Don't go away.
So you want natural sound coming in, but you also want to experience true sound. And this new hearing aid called the More is really trying to simulate a natural and real world environment.
Welcome back. Shopping for hearing aids can be challenging, especially if you haven't purchased them before. Some come with lots of options and settings, while others are simpler to use. Jillian joins me now with an array of options based on common concerns. What are people most often looking for today when searching for a hearing aid?
I think people are looking for something that's comfortable, usually small. If they could choose, they want something small. And obviously they want good sound quality and reliability. And, thankfully the hearing aids of today can provide and really meet the needs of users in all of those categories.
And how do you help them choose then which one is right for them?
So it's a mixture of obviously looking at the test results. So we do need to understand the degree of loss, the type of loss. That really determines which hearing aids will be suitable. But it's also a mix of what the user wants. So it's your personal preference, what you would like in a hearing aid, what you want in terms of style and size. So we come to sort of an agreement of how can we provide the best audiological results and performance of the hearing aids, but also meeting your personal preferences.
So at Hearing Life, what are your newest models that you're showing?
Yeah, so it's probably quite small on the screen, but I am holding the latest hearing aid. It is very small, I apologize, but that's what people want, is a small hearing aid. And actually, Dr. Myers made reference of the change for him with wearing a hearing aid that made him feel plugged up or occluded versus a hearing aid that keeps the ear open. Now, this model in particular does exactly that, and he's right. The overall feel and satisfaction is much higher when you can keep that ear canal open and you can have a sort of a natural sound. And this hearing aid in particular does that. So you want natural sound coming in, but you also want to experience true sound. And this new hearing aid called the More is really trying to simulate a natural and real world environment. So exactly what's going on in your environment is what you're going to hear at the brain level. This is what the brain wants. The brain wants to understand what's truly going on around you and your entire environment so that it can do the processing necessary in order for you to make sense of the world around you. And that's what's so special about this hearing aid. It's using artificial intelligence to do this, and it's simulating the truest, most natural sound environment for individuals who don't have true and natural sound because of the degradation from the hearing loss.
That makes so much sense that you would want your ears to be open, that otherwise it would sound like you were, I know even if I'm on a Zoom call and I have both earbuds in my ear, not the same, I can appreciate that, but I often take one out so that I can hear. And so are you saying that maybe the technology would provide the same effect?
Yes. He explained it as a head in a barrel, the head in a barrel effect. That's very accurate. It almost feels like your head's in a barrel. There's an echo. And we don't hear our voices like that naturally. So when you change the tonal quality of your voice as well as the volume, it's very noticeable and usually quite annoying. So if we can remove that from the user's experience, it definitely helps to improve satisfaction rates with hearing aids and the performance of the aid and just really the overall comfort of wearing the hearing aids all day long when your own voice doesn't have to be changed. It sounds like what you're used to hearing yourself. So yeah, it's a great advancement. And not this style of hearing aid has been around for a while, so it's not brand new, but we definitely find that users are much more happier with this style.
And for those who may not benefit from a hearing aid, what are some of the other options that you have?
If hearing aids are not an option at all, there are also accessories. So some individuals, if they're not ready for a hearing aid, they might look at, noise canceling headphones or devices to help them hear the TV or streaming audio that isn't a hearing aid itself. However, I would stress that if you have treatable hearing loss, that really you should be wearing a hearing aid to stimulate the brain as much as you possibly can. So I would not recommend looking for maybe a cheaper solution. I would go see a regulated healthcare professional, and based on their recommendations, that I'm sure that there would be something that would be suitable for you, and that's really the best way to treat hearing loss.
What would you say to someone who would say to you, I don't need a hearing aid, my hearing loss is only mild?
Yeah, I hear that all the time. That's very common. And it again goes back to that it is gradual and very subtle and happens over years. And so it is often hard for users to know that what they're missing, because they don't know what they're missing if they're not hearing it. But I would just say, it really does affect your overall quality of life and your well-being. It's one of your five senses, and it affects you every day because you need your ears to hear. And this is how we communicate with people. So I don't think that waiting is a good thing. I tell people all the time that you really need to act now instead of later.
Can you tell us a little bit about the new technologies out there that pair with your phone, for example?
Yeah, so Bluetooth technology is sort of the cat's meow for hearing aids, and that really opens up the world for those who are currently wearing hearing aids and may not even know that they have the ability to access Bluetooth. There are several different accessories that you can pair with your hearing aid, your smartphone being probably the one that people would understand, that you can now stream all of your audio through your hearing aids and through the phone. That means nice, hands-free, very clear phone calls. And for years, hearing aid users used to tell me that they couldn't even use a cell phone because they could not hear on a cell phone. But now that call streams directly to their ears, through both ears, through the hearing aids with very good clarity. And that really opens up your world and your freedom and flexibility of being able to communicate on something like a cell phone. Another huge game changer, I think, would be the accessory that you can hook up to your TV, because many people struggle to hear dialogue on the television or to watch TV with family members. A spouse wants the volume at a certain level, but the person with the hearing loss wants it louder. And so, it causes arguments. So now that person can have control over their own volume and hear the dialogue on the TV much more clearly. That means news, if you like to watch the news, or sports or movies where dialogue can sometimes be muffled or muddled. So that really opens up, again, more opportunity to enjoy life with the new accessories that are available.
Now, obviously, this will vary depending on what it is you need, but what's someone looking at in terms of a price tag?
The accessories themselves are typically not overly expensive. Most range anywhere between $200 and $500.
That's reasonable. And how about for the hearing aids?
Now that's a bigger range and more costly. So, hearing aids are an investment, but it's an investment in your quality of life, and it's one of your five senses. The range is typically anywhere between $1,000 to $4,000 per device.
Are there any funding subsidies that are available for people?
Yes, absolutely. But that does depend on where you live. So in Canada, where I am, although there's not very much really federal funding that is applicable for everybody, there typically is some provincial funding. So depending on what province you live in, you maybe have access to some funding.
All right, thanks so much, Jillian. There's more after the break. Stay tuned.
by improving the acoustics of a space, there's also the possibility that people are less dependent on hearing aids.
Welcome back. While hearing aids are an excellent tool for improving someone's access to sound, they may not be enough to overcome all listening environments. Background noise and listening at a distance are two environments where hearing aids can fall short. Fortunately, there are solutions for this. Stephanie, let me start with you. Hearing Loops Canada is an amazing organization, so tell me a bit about the hearing loop technology.
Yeah, so we are partnered with a company called Contacta based in the United Kingdom, and they are a global leader in hearing assistive technology. And we do have the rights to distribute that product in Canada. And we've done quite a bit of work nationally in order to advocate and educate Canadians about the importance of induction loops. And really that's been our passion up to this point. We do have a range of products that can be offered, whether it's one-to-one at a window or kiosk, as I mentioned earlier, like a bank environment, or even now with COVID being obviously quite prevalent in our discussion points. It's also been something that has been investigated for different clinics and testing centers. And we, again, can also deploy within large theater settings or corporate environments. So really, there is an induction loop technology that can be deployed in pretty much any space. And as Dr. Myers mentioned earlier, even within a home, through our home loop kit that we can also provide to customers that want to experience an induction loop within their own private environment.
Can you give me an example of a setting, though, where it's currently being used?
Oh, absolutely. So we've done various deployments. For example, the Citadel Theatre in Edmonton, Alberta, is one of the key areas where we've done a large loop, induction loop setting. And then recently we've been doing quite a few deployments with the one-to-one windows because of COVID and the barriers that have gone up. The speech transfer systems have really helped to not only advocate for people with hearing loss with the hearing loop aerial, but even for those that struggle to hear because of masks and the barrier being in place. So it's amplifying the noise between the barrier.
Dr. Myers mentioned difficulty in a church setting hearing, and you know, how prevalent is the hearing loop technology in religious settings across the country?
Very prevalent. It's actually probably the largest area or segment where induction loops have been deployed. So on our website, we do have a locator that will show where induction loops have been deployed. And I would say the majority at this point have been within places of worship.
Gordana, a quarter of the population has some sort of hearing loss, I've read. So when we talk about accessibility, what still needs to be done to make Canada more accessible for people with hearing impairment?
I think it's very important for us in Canada to do so. We are working towards it, obviously in Ontario with the AODA, with the Accessible Ontario's Act. We're working towards that. But overall, we need to make it accessible for all of us, from something simple as the captioning on television. I know hearing aids, and as far as amplifying sound though too, but understanding and educating ourselves. And like I said, as far as the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, we have so much resources and education available that we all benefit from it, and understanding what can be done, where we can go to make Canada accessible to all. We need to be part of the conversation. People with the hearing loss need to be included everywhere. And like I said, as far as with the hearing aids and being in meeting settings, etc., we need to make that accessible, all areas outside of the home and in retailers, other stores, anywhere that people do not have access to that. So we really want to push for that.
Peter, same question to you. I mean, what opportunities are there to do better?
Opportunities to address existing situations also occur where we can improve the acoustics of a space. I mean, certainly induction loops can help in situations where the acoustics of a space is poor. But by improving the acoustics of a space, there's also the possibility that people are less dependent on hearing aids or induction loops, that people that have some hearing loss, but don't yet have a hearing aid, are able to actually hear better.
How would that work?
That would work, for example, by controlling the reflections in a room. So the sound that we hear that is very close to the first sound we hear is something that our ear processes together and uses that as the signal we want to hear. But the sound that comes from later reflections, stuff that bounces off the back walls and comes back later on, acts like noise. And so we actually get interference from the same signal that just happens to show up later. So getting control of the sound in the room is something that is very significant to helping people that have some loss, but no support system yet.
Does that happen after a room is constructed, or does it happen while it's being constructed?
Ideally, it's done while it's being constructed. The cost to do it after it is constructed is usually quite a bit higher.
That would make sense. And Jillian, let me close out with you. Same question. Where are the opportunities to do better here?
Yeah, I mean, I work in private practice, so accessibility to me is accessibility to a hearing test. And so, our healthcare system does not cover hearing assessments. So for me, it's very important that Canadians have the opportunity to have their hearing tested and don't have to worry about a charge or a fee involved. So the accessibility I would like to see is, complimentary hearing assessments that any Canadian can get that information and not have to worry about the fee.
All right, when we come back, we'll hear some final thoughts from our panelists. Welcome back. It's that time in the show for final thoughts. So we'll start with you, Jillian.
So final thought for me would be the importance of a baseline hearing test. So I hope the viewers really get out there, get their hearing checked if they haven't already. We are an essential service, so even during the pandemic, you can get your hearing tested. Knowledge is power, so understanding where your hearing is at is very key and most important.
Stephanie.
Thank you. Yes, definitely having both the public and private sector recognizing the importance of acknowledging accessibility and really opening up their eyes and ears, of course, to folks that are hard of hearing and finding technologies such as induction loops to assist those that are struggling.
Gordana.
Thank you. And again, looking for support. And at the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, we do have a free peer mentoring program available across Canada for outreach. So people can talk to one of our mentors and get the support that they need through our mentoring program. So I encourage that.
Dr. Holland?
Yeah, I would say get checked. If you think you might have some hearing loss, if you're noticing that it's harder to hear people, especially when they're wearing a mask, that could be a sign that you have some hearing loss, so please get assessed.
And Peter.
For me, the most significant thing is prevention. I think there should be more effort put into hearing prevention, hearing loss prevention efforts, where industry and government are promoting hearing conservation plans for industry. It should become necessary for every industry to have that.
All right, well, a big thank you to my panelists for being here and for you at home watching. We'll see you soon. For now, it's time to zoom out.